Hello, my name is Jimena Murillo, and I'm here today with Bob Reed of Edge Philanthropy. Bob is both a scholar and a practitioner of philanthropy. Today, we're going to discuss the topic of family philanthropy, specifically family foundations. So let's get started. Welcome, Bob. Please tell us, what is a family foundation?
Thank you, Jimena. First of all, I think it's important to understand that family foundations are the product of a social contract between government and families who have concentrated wealth. The contract is that in exchange for families permanently committing some of their wealth for charitable purposes and complying with the rules that govern charitable giving, that foundations in turn are given the ability to pursue the charitable interests that they have and to be able to manage and control these foundations in perpetuity. So there are foundations that are established that have a fixed date of termination. Those are called foundations that are sunsetting, and there are foundations that are perpetual. I would say the overwhelming majority of family foundations are intended to be perpetual, that they will engage multiple generations of family in the joy and the really wonderful deed of committing to family charitable giving in making this a better world. They, as I said earlier, are given the ability to choose whatever appropriate charitable activity they want to support. They are not accountable to outside parties because this is private wealth that's being committed to charitable activities. They are required to distribute approximately 5% of their endowed assets each year for charitable expenses.
Wonderful. So what is a typical family foundation like?
Well, they're governed by family typically. And if the donor is still alive, very often the donor's active in the governance of that foundation and establishing some of the parameters around which the giving of the foundation will proceed. If the donor no longer has survived, they often follow something called donor intent, which is some expression of interest or intent that is charitable in nature by the donor. And the family attempts to honor that subsequently from that point on. There are also often non-family participants in the governance of family foundations. They usually are very close friends, business associates, trusted advisors, could be the family lawyer, could be the family accountant.
But you have often said that family philanthropy is a very special form of charitable activity. Can you explain why this is so?
Yeah, rapidly we're seeing that family foundations are becoming the overwhelming majority of all foundations in the United States. And all foundations in the United States collectively manage about $1 trillion. And I don't know about you, Jimena, but that sounds like a lot of money to me, that foundations exist to influence the activities of the third sector. So the third sector is this space between the government and the private sector. It's where social benefit often occurs. And it turns out, as large as the economic footprint of the foundations collectively in this country might be, their total assets only represent about 0.75% of the assets of the third sector. So the third sector is this gigantic entity, and foundations are this very small part. So that means if foundations are going to have an influence, it's more than being the tail that wags the dog. In this case, from a geometric perspective, it may be more the flea on the tail that's trying to wag the dog. Therefore, we need to be able to practice philanthropy in ways that are uniquely effective. And in this regard, this is where I think families really excel. They're highly entrepreneurial. They're very relationship driven. They don't believe in arm's length grant making. They don't just write checks and send them off. They really get to know the organizations that they fund. And sometimes they want to get to know and actually interact with the people who are the net beneficiaries of the organizations they fund. They're not afraid of risk. They're willing to take risks. They're willing to look at new ways of doing things. They want to innovate. These families very often earn the wealth that they manage today as a result of highly entrepreneurial, risk-engaging kinds of behaviors where they innovated and did really interesting things. And that culture tends to carry over into how they practice philanthropy as well. The other thing too is because of the fact that they don't have, in the traditional sense, external stakeholders, they really have the ability to be very intellectually honest about what they're doing and the effects that they're having, which means that they can be objective in asking themselves, have we achieved the impact that we wanted to achieve? Were our ideas effective? Or maybe do we need to go back to the drawing board and reconsider them? There's a concept in business where people are encouraged to fail quickly, right? Family foundations do that too. They fail quickly. If it's a bad idea, they don't let it linger. They don't let it fester. They don't try to keep it perpetuated. They look and say, hey, this really didn't work. Let's try something new and something different. Their grant decisions, based on the research that I've participated in, while certainly influenced by family interests, and they have every right to do that, they tend to be made based on the merits of the ideas proposed, not on external or political influences. And if you look at other kinds of foundations, whether they're corporate or whether they're public or whether they are community foundations, those foundations don't have the same luxury of being able to make decisions internally based on what they think are the merits of those decisions. They also have to go the extra step and ask themselves, how will these grant decisions be interpreted by external stakeholders who can influence the ability of those foundations to continue to exist? So family foundations are unique in these regards, and they also are unique in one other regard, according to my research, and that is that they have an insatiable appetite for impact. They are constantly looking for ways to accelerate their impact, and they do that in ways that include grantees in our research tell us that when they send reports to family foundations, those reports are actually read. And very often they generate questions from the family foundations. What did you mean when you said such and such on page 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever? Because they're really interested in knowing. This is not just simply a transactional kind of relationship where they just check boxes. Okay, report received, move on. No, they really digest this information because of this insatiable appetite for impact. They really want to know what the effect of their grants are. They're willing to make grants in very untraditional ways. They really think outside the box. And they love to co-create with their grantees. They see their grantees as partners. These are not merely vendors. These are partners who they want to co-create with and to succeed with or to fail.
It's very true. They put their heart in what they are doing. But I'm sure that based on your experience, they confront different challenges. What do you think there are special challenges in family philanthropy?
Well, let's paint with a broad brush, because there are, every foundation, every family is somewhat unique, right? Mm-hmm. But family foundations, for the reasons I've already stated, really struggle with understanding how to measure and assess impact. And they really want to try to understand that. And that's difficult to do in the context of social change, because there's so many intervening factors that can have a much bigger impact on desired social change than a specific grant. And so that's complicated and frustrating to understand what is the relationship between the giving and desired outcome or impact. They want to find ways to increasingly be more rigorous in the way they make grants, how they structure those grants, how they manage and monitor those grants, how they learn from them. And then I saved the biggest one for the end on this particular question. And that is that since family foundations overwhelmingly are perpetual in the way that they're designed, they really struggle often with how to keep subsequent generations engaged. That's a subject matter that we'll talk about in greater detail in another video, because I've done specific research in that area. And it's something that really merits a little deeper dive than it might be possible here today.
Bob, can you share with us how do family foundations interact with grant-seeking nonprofits?
So nonprofits that have been involved in our research tell us that family foundations in particular are hard to get to know. They're hard to access. And part of that just has to do with that most family foundations are pretty small and don't have staff and other ways that we're used to being able to access funders through. And so it's difficult to get to know them. It's difficult to get access. Once they have achieved access and really facilitated relationship, those grantees tell us they would rather work with these family foundations than virtually any other kind of funder. And the reasons why is because there's no false veneer to the interactions that they have. There's no pro forma exercise. Foundations that are family driven tend to be very genuine. They're very logical, sequential, and they're very accommodating. They really understand empathic grant making. They want to know the problems, the stresses, the strains of the organizations they make grants to, and they want to show respect and appreciation to the people that are in those grantee organizations. They are extraordinarily candid, and they expect a high level of candor from these grantees. They want unmassaged information. They do not want anything that is spun. If a grantee tried something and it failed, they want them to come in and say, that was a really bad idea. We thought it was a good idea at the beginning, but we realized it's not a good idea. And here's what we learned from it. And family foundations absorb that. They love that because they want to move their grant making to increasingly to more impactful levels. And to do that, they really need partners who are willing to look honestly and share honestly about what they're doing. They also are willing to accept some of the limitations that some of their grantees have. They understand because of their empathic orientation and because the natural relational dynamics that most families have internal to themselves, that they open up their living rooms and extend to their grantees. They understand there's no such thing as a perfect grantee out there. And they're willing to make accommodations around that. They are interested in substance, not showmanship. So they're not all that worried about the manner and form in which a grant proposal is written. They're really interested in understanding, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do that? How do you think that's going to have an impact? What's different about this? How are you inviting us into something that's innovative and new and different? And they want to build recurring relationships. The best relationships family foundations have with their grantees are recurring. They're multiple grants, where one grant sets up the possibility of another grant. And I'm not talking about necessarily providing ongoing operating funding. I'm talking about being able to come back and reimagine what's possible and to see the capacity of a grantee organization grow and try and do new things that foundations want to be part of. And they want to develop that kind of intimate trust in these grantees and that relationship that facilitates better grants.
Bob, do you have any advice for families engaged together in philanthropy?
The first thing I think I'd like to say, Jimena, in this regard is that family philanthropy is an intensely noble experience. Think about what it does. It engages family in coming together with the express purpose of making a better world. However small their grant-making capability is, they are seeking to have a better world and be part of that better order. And so this is something that, if done right, facilitates a sense of joy and purpose and a sense of identity as a family. There are two kinds of families: families that have challenges and families that will have challenges, right? And what family foundations do is they create a venue in which families address a lot of the challenges. Sometimes they're challenges internal to the family. Sometimes they're challenges about some of the things that they want to do. But the foundation gives them an opportunity to work through those things in a way that allows them to bring everybody around the table, to show respect, appreciation, to give voice to everybody in the family about matters that are of concern to them. We know that from family systems theory, that if you think of families as kind of like a mobile that you would see over maybe a crib, where you have all these characters that are hanging from the mobile and that the infant can play with, they're all in perfect balance, right? But that's because they're all hanging in sort of the same kind of length from the device. Well, as families grow, they change their position in the family, and that can cause the family to come out of balance, right? And ultimately, they have to find a way to come back into balance in order to be able to support each other. Family philanthropy, because it challenges families to rise above themselves for the purpose of making a better world, they find ways to improve their interactions with each other in ways that strengthen family and that allow family to grow, and that families don't get trapped in having to be the same forever. They can actually grow and develop as individuals and collectively. There is a wonderful sense of reciprocity in family philanthropy. It's amazing, and it's been statistically proven that giving to others strengthens us individually, and it strengthens us as a family. Onboarding new generations, though, should not be taken for granted. And we are going to talk more about this another time. This is probably the most significant area of challenge for foundations. As a former foundation CEO, I used to say, the first 70% of my job was to support the family. Why? Because if you don't have the family together, how do you have philanthropy, right? So the family is instrumental to this whole idea of this philanthropic purpose. So if you're going to have, if you're a staff role in a family foundation, which is frankly quite an honor to be invited in to a family to have a role like that, you really need to understand you're there to support them and to help them to understand their priorities, to work through communication, and to create the kind of warmth and reception to subsequent generations that is necessary to facilitate their involvement. And then I would say the second 70% of my job was to manage the foundation. So that tells you something else about family philanthropy from a staff standpoint. It is not just an 8 to 5 Monday through Friday job. You're really being given the opportunity to come into the living room of a family, to be part, an extension of that family in the most noble exercise of philanthropy. You can't contain that. If you're looking for a job, you probably should not go to work for a family foundation. If you're looking for a passion, a family foundation is a wonderful place to be. So families are very generous in sharing the joy they find with their team, including their staff. It is probably the most significant end product of their engagement in philanthropy. And anything at all that interferes with, that impedes the sense of joy that a family has, is malpractice in family philanthropy. And so whether you are a family member, whether you are a trusted advisor, attorney, accountant, business friend, or whether you're a staff member, you have an absolute obligation to find a way to make more abundant the sense of joy that is present in philanthropy.
Wonderful. We've learned so much, Bob. Thank you so much. I've been here today with Bob Reed of Edge Philanthropy. Please feel free to reach out if we can be of further assistance. And please consult the resource section of our website for select publications and videos, www.edgephilanthropy.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimena.